D1Baseball reaction show, I guess you'd call it. Election Monday reaction show,
Yeah,
brought to you by S2 Cognition and Wilson Baseball. Thank you to our partners. Guys, we're going to dive right in because we don't have a lot of time today. There's a conference call at 1:30 with the committee chairman. We got to jump on, but just instant reactions. Marcus, I mean, I will just say this to start with. I'm stunned. I'm stunned. I'm gutted for NC State. All the teams didn't get in. I mean, there's teams that had incredible seasons, but like NC State in particular just felt like a guillotine out of nowhere.
yeah, did not see that coming. Obviously we had them nowhere near the bubble. Obviously the bubble moved, and that I'm sure that played a big role in it. But I think that the first thing that comes to mind for me is this year, non-conference strength of schedule carried the day. That I mean, it always matters. It's just kind of one of the things that matter. This time, it looked like that's how they broke ties, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
every week we go through this and we have trouble at the end trying to figure out, okay, well, there's not a lot of difference. It's what do you value? Well, we saw what this committee valued. It was non-conference strength of schedule. The other thing that struck me as a little bit different is series wins seem to be a criteria, where before it
Mm-hmm.
was just kind of individual games, and that was, at least not explicitly stated in the criteria, but it is, I guess, now part of the criteria. So those were two things that really struck me today.
Yeah, Mark, I tweeted about that, about the whole series thing, because in the past, you're right. They've always said, like, hey, we don't necessarily look at series wins, it's about individual wins. So the fact that Mike Buddy said that was actually, to me, very noteworthy moving forward, because we
Hmm.
as a trio have always looked at it like, hey, they have a series win
Yeah.
over this team, they have a series win over that team. And we've always kind of stepped back and go, you know what, they don't necessarily look at that. So clearly, in like the case of NC State, Mike Buddy mentioned that they won 4 out of 10 ACC series, and none of them were against teams in the field. The thing about NC State for me is this: NC State was within range from an RPI standpoint. I get it. If you look at their resume during the regular season, there are definitely some warts. There were some warts with all these bubble teams. But the thing that for me that differentiated NC State from some of these other teams is the fact that the state did go to the ACC tournament. They rolled through that thing,
Yeah.
and they got to Sunday at the ACC tournament and lost to North Carolina. And the other thing for me about NC State is I would think they would rank well with the regional advisory committee because they have some high-profile players. You look at Chris Villeman on the back end of the bullpen. You look at Tommy Tanks, breaking the freshman home run record. They've got star appeal. They've got star power. So the star power, the finish, something's just iffy here. And I'll be honest with you. I'll be very honest. Last year, Elliot Avent was pretty honest with people about the way everything was kind of handled last year, and I'll be frank, I think that hurt him. I think the fact that he was very critical of the NCAA last year at times, I think hurt him on this deal, 100%.
I mean, I thought he handled it as well as could possibly be expected last year, given the circumstances.
Yeah.
Unprecedented, brutal end to that thing last year. On the heels of that, I cannot believe they have to have this gut punch. I mean, if I figured if there's anywhere close, there's got to be a human element that tilts in their favor after last
Hmm.
year, and then you throw on top of that the marketability factor with Tommy Tanks. It's like,
Hmm.
I mean, like those are not two things that the committee is like
Yeah.
supposed to look at, but I thought they would. And secondly, look, I mean, yes, you can poke holes, non-conference strength of schedule,
Mm-hmm.
series in conference. That's something we value. But at the end of the day, you go 17-16 aggregate in the ACC, which was like this basically a virtual tie with the SEC for conference RPI. They were almost like legitimately almost tied. And you have a 33 RPI. It's like, it's not like Arkansas, where you have a great record, but your RPI is lower and that's why you're not hosting. Like their RPI is fine and they're
Mm-hmm.
above 500 in basically 1A or 1B conference. I mean, like you don't have to go farther than that. You're in, like you're a 2 seed with that profile almost all the time.
Yeah. The other thing, and I hope this didn't come into play, is that NC State would have been a 10th ACC team. Ole Miss became the 9th SEC team, so now they're even. And you got those two juggernaut conferences, and they both get the same amount of hosts. They both get the same amount of regional berths. That looks
Yeah.
awful coincidental to me.
Well, yeah, and the thing is too, and as a trio here, like we try to like make decisions on our own, but also think of the way the committee would do it. And remember, we've had discussions on the Nerdcast, when we've had 11 ACC teams, and at one point we had 8 SEC. I remember having the discussion with you guys, like I just don't think they're going to put that many ACC teams in compared to that few SEC teams, and so that's clearly kind of what happened here. The Ole Miss guys was kind of the big surprise. We had them as our 5th team out of the field. Ole Miss was behind NC State in the RPI, and NC State had Ole Miss beaten pretty much every metric, but I think it was non-conference strength of schedule, if I'm not mistaken.
And it's not like Ole Miss has some elite non-conference strength of schedule.
Yeah.
96. Ole Miss went, 14-17 aggregate. I guess if you include the midweek win against Mississippi State, it's 15-17 aggregate in the SEC. Compared with 17-16 for State. I mean, all the top 50 games and all that stuff, top 25 games. It all favors NC State. And the difference here, guys, is look, the ACC doesn't have a seat at the table. John Cohen's on the committee from the SEC. Kirby Hocutt's on the committee from the Big 12. It just is what it is. Politics are part of this. People on the committee take care of their own. As ACC for the last couple of years has gotten screwed repeatedly. Last year, Notre Dame got screwed. This year, Notre Dame got screwed. I mean, you look at where Florida State is somehow one of the top last 4 teams in this week. That was surprising. And NC State not getting in. I mean, it all adds up to they have no respect for the ACC, and the ACC doesn't have anyone fighting for it.
Yeah, the other thing for me too is I'm glad you brought up Florida State. Florida State, to me, being one of the last 4 out was a huge surprise. I mean, I get it. There's some negatives on that resume, but I mean, you're talking about a team with Bryce Hubbard, Parker Messick. I mean, Florida State had to rank really high with the regional advisory committee. So Florida State being a Final Four tells me that the committee just doesn't like. The committee thinks the ACC is balanced, but that the ACC is not very good.
Mm-hmm. And Rutgers is another one. I mean, a league that has no representation on the committee. Mm-hmm. Maryland should have been a top 8 national seed, and they're number 15. They're number 15 with a top 10 RPI. Number 9 in the RPI, going 45-12, winning their league, and they're number 15. And then Rutgers, which wins 40 odd. What was it? I mean, they won 44 games, 44-15 with a number 42 RPI. That profile team always gets in, and I know their non-conference schedule is light. I mean, they play in New Jersey, there's only so much you can do there. And they don't have a lot of top 50 wins. I get it, but just look at precedent here. There's precedent. The Big Ten, you're in the 40s, you have a great conference record, you're in, and that's just how it should be. And this year it wasn't.
Yeah, certainly those were all omissions. And, Wofford had a tremendous regular season. They didn't get in. They go to DBU and win 2 out of 3. Right. But DBU gets in because they won other games. And I did think it was interesting, the comment of record against the field. Obviously we can't do that because we don't know who's in the field, but that last year there were comments about that as well. So maybe that's something we need to find a way to track and be able to project better.
Yeah, the other thing too, the other team that I talk about is UTSA. Pat Hallmark did a phenomenal job with the Roadrunners this year. They had a great conference record. They got to the conference championship game in the tournament. The other thing interesting about UTSA too is they finished several spots ahead of Ole Miss, Arkansas in the RPI, Arizona in the RPI. But going back to what Mark made the great point earlier about how non-conference strength of schedule is such a big deal this year. Look at UTSA's non-conference weekend schedule: Tarleton, Seattle, Southern. They did play Oklahoma in a series on the road, but they got swept in that series. So if you look at those first 3 series, Southern, Seattle, Tarleton, that's exactly why they were left out.
And I think that there's certainly, some merit to non-conference strength of schedule. It needs to be part of the pie, obviously, it should be, but it shouldn't matter more, in my opinion, than your conference show.
One of many.
Yeah. And especially since there's, in some cases, there's only so much you can control with your non-conference strength of schedule. I mean, if you schedule Northeastern, they're predicted to win the league. They're coming off a regional. You expect that to be a great series if you're NC State. Instead, they go 500. That hurts you. And there's all this stuff like that happens. But one thing you that's consistent is your conference schedule. And if you fare well, especially in a power league, if you you meet certain benchmarks, that should matter. And if you're UTSA or Old Dominion and you go 19-11 and you make deep runs in the conference tournament and like those teams did everything they could do. UTSA at 36. I mean, the bubble was super tight this year. And you can argue most of these teams either way. I have a hard time with Dallas Baptist over Wofford. Based on the head-to-head and the fact that Dallas Baptist was so mediocre in their conference, even though they're a great out of conference. But there's a head-to-head here with Wofford. Wofford went to their place and beat them. Wofford won their league, ran away with it, reached the finals at a conference tournament. And there's that head-to-head, and the RPI is fine for Wofford, mid-30s. So, some of these I just don't, again, you can argue one way or another on Wofford on its own, but Wofford versus DBU, I cannot see DBU ahead of them.
Yeah, I mean, head-to-head was thrown out under this condition, and non-conference strength of schedule carried the day. That's as simple as we can make it. And the question will be, and I'm poised to ask in a few minutes, is how did that come about? Why did that carry this committee? Because I've been in a lot of committee settings, and a lot of times there's a very vocal person who really stresses a point, and then that becomes the narrative, and you spend a lot of time talking about that topic, maybe at the exclusion of some of the others that could be just as valuable, right? So that don't know, right? But that is kind of the way this looks, because there are a lot of ways this could have gone down, because it's what do you value? And this year it was exclusively, non-conference strength of schedule and maybe a little bit with series wins.
And I welcome series wins being a bigger part in it. I think that's good. I think it's overdue. We've been banging that drum for years, but I don't know.
And if everyone knows about this and it stays consistent year over year, then you can schedule toward it. You build everything around that. But it's the revolving door that's so frustrating. That's, we spin the wheel and, this is important this year. Well, the committee changes, but there's got to be some continuity there to keep this consistent so people understand where the goalposts are.
Exactly. Well said, as usual. Oklahoma, I mean, we talked about this last night, so I won't get into it again, but not hosting, that's another one that really, stuck in my craw. Any other things, guys, today that, not the stuff that happened last night, but the stuff that came out today that really bothered you?
I don't know what bothered me, but I certainly was surprised at the lack of the geography playing a part in pairings. They're going to fly people who could drive, and it's kind of interesting because we typically don't do that. Usually, if there's a suitable place for a 2 seed to go, you're not going to fly in somebody else and fly them out. Now, maybe from a competitive standpoint, you might think it's a better fit. I would argue that it wasn't in most of these cases that we looked at, but it was just a random draw. It was like you drew it up in the basketball tournament and you didn't care about attendance. You didn't care about geography. You're just kind of seeding it. And that's just different, right? Again, consistency, I think, is what people crave, and especially people projecting this. And when you change it up a lot, it's just hard for people to understand. Change is hard.
Change is hard.
Yeah. And if you continue to change, people are always going to be, off balance.
And Gonzaga is a great example here. I mean, them getting sent to Blacksburg, was it? Corvallis is right there. I mean, I get it. But there's in other cases, they're still doing the same old. We still have A&M and TCU, with the Schloss Bowl.
I think that was just too juicy. They just couldn't resist that.
Too juicy. Yeah, that could be. That could be. How about you, Ken? What else sticks out to you?
I think that the thing that sticks out to me is, one of the regionals I really, really like is the Gainesville regional. They did not do Florida any favors. And granted, Florida was one of those teams that, had a 500 SEC record. They became a host by kind of storming through the SEC tournament, getting to Sunday, but Central Michigan with Andrew Taylor and company, Jordan Bischel's done a phenomenal job to have them as a 4 seed. Then you get Liberty, who, by the way, took a series from the Gators earlier this year. Then you get an Oklahoma team who, I'll be predicting this later, but they're my national championship sleeper right now. I really, really like the vibe of this team. They're loaded on the mound. They're very offensive right now. That's a very tough regional for Florida, and they should have had a tough regional, but I just think that's a regional of death for me.
Yeah, Auburn got a tough one too. I mean, with UCLA and Florida State, I mean, that is a wonderful first round matchup and will lead to some fun stuff through that weekend.
Yeah, a A lot of intriguing storylines in these regional
Yeah.
fields. We'll break those.
Wake Forest in the Maryland. You know, we talked about the ACC earlier and the kind of the lack of respect for the ACC. You know, Wake Forest is a team with a 6 RPI. They're a team that not a lot of people talked about as a host, but you can bet that that's bulletin board material for those guys as they go to College Park and face off against UConn that first game. Keep an eye on Wake. They're playing really well right now.
Yep. Yeah. I would agree with you. There's there's plenty of storylines that we can break down as we get later in.
Oh, here's a good one. Hey, how about Texas and Air Force in that 1-4, that 1 versus 4? You know, Air Force they blew out Texas in one midweek game and they split. But getting Paul Skeens as your first game, that 1-4, that's really, really interesting for the Longhorns. It probably will force David Pierce to throw Pete Hansen that first game. It could be a game changer in Austin.
It is interesting. It is interesting that we do have some rematches that are not geography based. You know, usually people complain, oh, we got to go to the same place year over year, but it's because you're close by and you can bus there. But we're flying people to the same places.
Yeah,
I mean, that just kind of, I don't know. I don't know.
Ole Miss in Arizona randomly facing off.
Yeah. We had, by the way, Mark Calloway here is asking if we're surprised if East Carolina got a top 8. A little bit, guys, for me, but I'll be honest with you. I get it. The metrics aren't terrific, but I mean, conference champ, conference tournament champ, 18 straight wins. I don't have an issue with it.
No, I don't have an issue with it. I mean, I was surprised based on the 2-7 top 50 that they would, and North Carolina also won a head-to-head against them, and it's 20-16 top 50. That just seems like such a dramatic disparity. And North Carolina's higher in the RPI, and finished 15-2, which is not quite 18-0, but also much better competition. Like, you throw all that together, like, I mean, I'm a little surprised, but it's not egregious. It's fine.
For me, if you win your conference, you win your conference tournament, and you have a top 10 RPI, I'm never going to quarrel with you getting a good seed.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Won't quarrel.
Oklahoma State, somebody asked about Grant G asked about Oklahoma State. I liked Oklahoma State's metrics. I like the fact they went on the road to Vanderbilt early in the season. And I think that, again, I think the Regional Advisory Committee probably came into play here. I think if you look at Oklahoma State, I saw them against Texas in 3 games. I think they're a really good offensive team. Obviously, on the mound, Bryce Osmond's a question mark because of his health. But, I mean, they've got depth on the mound. I think Oklahoma State passes the eyeball test, and certainly they have the metrics.
Boy, I mean, I would have had Oklahoma even ahead of Oklahoma State. I definitely would have had Oklahoma ahead of Texas. And also I would have had them, I think, ahead of Oklahoma State. I mean, I know the RPI is the thing holding them back, but Oklahoma checks all the boxes. Like, even the non-conference RPI is solid, number 27. Great performance in the league. They reach they win the conference tournament. The top 50 is better than these other teams. It's just like the only thing that's holding them back is just the little RPI and the fact that the run was later. But boy, that one.
One thing I wonder is like why do we need to know the host today earlier? Like, why don't we let all the games play on? Have deliberations from the committee standpoint all this morning into the afternoon. Let's announce this on Monday night at 7.
Because what was the benefit of doing it last night? You didn't get any TV viewers out of it. You didn't have a show to do it. It wasn't content. It was just it was tweeting and social media. That's really it. What was the advantage?
I feel like the Oklahoma game was huge for hosting.
Correct.
And if you're the Big 12 and Pac-12, do you want to have your games and put yourself at a potential disadvantage because your games aren't done? Maybe you fight back and you want to push those up earlier if they're going to continue to release them at night. I would.
Yep.
I want to put give my teams every advantage.
Yep. That's a good point.
For sure. One other quick point I was going to make too. Notre Dame was obviously a hot button topic last night, not getting a host. I thought Notre Dame actually got a really tough draw. Getting Texas State, as their 3. Then having to get through Georgia Texas Tech is their 3. Then having to go through Georgia Southern, and then you have UNCG who just roughed up Wofford in 2 games. That's a really tough draw for Notre Dame on the heels of getting snubbed out of a host.
Yeah.
We got to run, guys, or at least I do.
All right.
Well, let's we'll wrap it up here. We got to hop on this conference call with the committee chairman and ask some tough questions. So, thanks everybody for watching. We will have more analysis of the field over the course of the week. We'll break down these regionals. Until then, so long, everybody.